The Organization is one of the most mysterious groups in One Punch Man. They're also one of the biggest threats in the series. And by the end of this video, you'll understand how deeply they've been controlling things since the very beginning. Every member of the Organization that we've seen so far has been a robot with artificial intelligence. While their goals still remain unknown, it is clear that they are always trying to collect more battle data. They allowed the Paradise Faith cult to steal their battlesuits so that they could be tested in the field. They sent Machine God G4, a disaster-level demon robot, to kill the strongest man on Earth, King. It was supposed to be a performance test for his battle AI. A surprise attack would not let it collect any data, so G4 made its presence and plan known to the hero. The Organization is indifferent when it comes to the lives of humans. G4 planned to kill 10 people a minute, and ultimately destroy all of M City if King wouldn't fight him. At a glance, Jenos could tell that G4's technology was arguably better than his own, and Saitama even said that G4 looked pretty strong. But that was only G4's outer shell. His true body was much smaller, but even more dangerous. Molten metal couldn't do any damage, and its laser systems were insane. Jenos managed to win, but it wasn't thanks to superior technology. Jenos thought outside the box and was forced to act more tactically than we have ever seen him be. We didn't get the proper ending of their battle on screen, but Jenos was in terrible shape afterwards. He brought G4's parts to Dr. Kuseno so that he could add them to Jenos' design. Now, it's subtle, but Dr. Kuseno seems to recognize the Organization's technology. To be fair, we don't know Dr. Kuseno all that well. He seems like a good guy, but maybe his past is connected to the Organization. We know that the good doctor has been hunting Mad Cyborg for even longer than Jenos. Could this mean that there is a connection between the Organization and the monster that killed Jenos' family? Either way, G4's parts made Jenos stronger and faster. But it wasn't until his Monster Association upgrades that Jenos was able to match the late G4's laser system. And eventually, G4 was replaced by Machine God G5. G4's outer shell was a cybernetic knight. G5's outer shell was a cybernetic samurai. Any guesses for what G6 will be based on? I don't know about you, but I am really hoping for a cybernetic ninja. G5 joined the Monster Association. This was a big brain strategic move within an even bigger galaxy brain plan. Let me show you how deep this all goes. The Organization is very well connected. A financial backer of theirs is a man named Narinki. Mr. Narinki is also a financial backer of the Hero Association. His contributions account for 7% of all of their funding, making him one of their top 3 sponsors. Talk about connections in high places. And conveniently enough, Mr. Narinki's son was taken hostage by the Monster Association as a way to force the Hero Association to take immediate action against them. With his child in danger, Mr. Narinki was impatient and frustrated by the Hero Association's inaction. So he decided to take matters into his own hands. He gathered a private squad of trained fighters and equipped them with secret battlesuits made by, you guessed it, the Organization. Their members were Captain Tongara, Soshi, Shinpei, Asami, Noria, Sanshon, and Gomago. These suits of theirs may have been improved versions of the ones used by Hammerhead and the Paradise Faith cult. If they could successfully save his son Waganma, the billionaire promised to pay them so much that even their grandchildren would have more money than they could ever use. We don't exactly know what level they'd be at in terms of hero rankings, but G5 did not have a single scratch on him after fighting them. They were also taken down at their best by Atomic Samurai's disciples, who respected their strength. I'd guess that they're each B-class or lower A-class level at best. The Organization seems to be very thorough when it comes to data collection. With their battlesuits, Narinki's private squad was able to kill 2 members of the Monster Association. Thanks to this, the Organization may have gained a solid understanding of how the suits perform in the field. Or, considering Narinki's squad prefers ambush strategies as sneak attacks, they weren't able to gather proper data for the Organization. So from there, G5 delivered them as a gift to the Monster Association. As punishment for killing monsters, Narinki's private squad would either be killed or forced to eat monster cells. But G5 proposed a different idea that was said to be based on its fight against them. Because of their battlesuits' high battle potential, G5 suggested that the Monster Association use them as pawns. Since the suits had been customized to match each of them and no one else, especially not monsters, their lives would need to be spared. The monster Do S used her unique mind control powers to turn them into her love slaves. This instantly granted them peak physicality, and their suits advanced proportionately, showing that they're able to grow stronger with the wearer. And the suit's changes were permanent. Their suits were even able to repair themselves from damage, but because their weapons weren't made like their battle suits, the squad wasn't too difficult to disarm. Even the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th ranked A-class heroes had a hard time destroying their suits, and ultimately couldn't. The suits also had the chance to be tested against the number 1 A-class hero, Sweet Mask. In the original version of the fight, Sweet Mask absolutely slaughtered the group in what is perhaps the most graphic display of carnage in One Punch Man history. Then he smashed their new master, Do S. But these events are no longer canon. In the current version, practically 2 seconds after leaving things to Sweet Mask, Atomic's disciples came back and miraculously knocked out the entire group they were just struggling against. And seizing the opportunity, Sweet Mask neutralized Do S, freeing them from her mind control. As badass as the original version was, it was also an abnormal level of violence against human characters for the series. Not to mention the fact that it would instantly make Sweet Mask pretty irredeemable. But let me tell you the real reason Murata decided to change this. He's not just a man of culture. Murata is the culture. This man refuses to let baddies die in this story. Mosquito Girl took a hit from Saitama and survived. Do S was supposed to die for her failure like a wakened cockroach, but was spared. Then she had her head crushed and survived. Psychos got clapped by Tatsumaki. Then she fused with the most powerful monster on the planet, fought damn near every S-Class hero, and made a deal with God that she later failed, and still she survived. With all that in mind, let me give you guys a better look at Asami and Noria. Despite being mercenaries, they're apparently very playful. And of course, the chest pieces of their suits were made detachable. I'm telling you, Murata would sooner redraw the entire series than let 3 baddies go to the grave in one chapter. But while the battlesuit experiment was being conducted, G5 was reverse engineering and studying Metal Knight's technology. Dr. Beaufoy's favorite machine entered the Monster Association's base before anyone else, but it was defeated by Monster King Orochi so fast that it wasn't able to activate its self-destruct sequence. From there, G5 got its hands on the remains and stress tested the machine beyond its limits. Although reconstruction was unsuccessful, a number of parts had been deconstructed almost perfectly with virtually no damage. But even with such an incredibly short amount of time to study the pieces, this one member of the organization was able to create 2 giant robots. They were both taken down by the S-Class hero, Zombie Man. He's better known for his regeneration than he is for his strength, but they did manage to deal a fair amount of damage to him. However, the fight was made a whole lot easier thanks to Child Emperor's correct theory about their weaknesses. Although, when Child Emperor went up against G5, knowing that it was a machine type, he decided to use Big Basket, his enemy machine disabling device, a cage of high voltage cables that also blasted its targets with signals that would force it to shut down. Proving that the organization's technology was superior, this did absolutely nothing to G5. Child Emperor then resorted to using 3 of his faithful underdog man robots, and G5 actually took offense to being compared to such a dog-level artificial intelligence. While G5 fought the fusion underdog Cerberus, Child Emperor took the chance to run away. Only one of the 3 dogs was able to survive the encounter. Meanwhile, G5 was totally unharmed. G5 was later able to acquire battle data from Atomic Samurai after watching the S-Class hero slaughter dozens of monsters. G5 was confident that it had a complete copy of the samurai sword techniques. The two had an epic samurai standoff, but in the end, G5 couldn't measure up and was mercilessly torn apart. However, G5 was able to escape because all the damage had only hit its outer shell. Ultimately, its true body was totally destroyed by Jenos in one hit, showing how far his own parts had developed in only 2 months. But this definitely wasn't the end of the organization's involvement in this war, and that's because they played on both sides. The Hero Association was sure that there was a traitor among them. That's why they kept the raid a secret from heroes like Bang and Jenos. Most suspicions point to Metal Knight these days. After all, his technology, which had a ton of hero data, miraculously ended up in the enemy's hands. He also refused to disclose the location of the Monster Association's headquarters and didn't show up to help until all of the fighting was over. which is exactly what he did when the heroes fought Boros and the Dark Matter Thieves. But I believe Dr. Beaufoy is being framed. It's not unusual for S-Class heroes to have deep histories with the various evil groups of the series. Tatsumaki was experimented on by Tsukuyomi as a child. Flashy Flash came from The Village, a training ground for ninjas that was made by one of God's minions. Zombie Man was created by the House of Evolution. And there is no doubt in my mind that Drive Knight is a double agent for the Organization. Think about it. Metal Knight likes to add a bunch of eyes to his robot designs. Meanwhile, the Organization prefers theirs to have one eye, just like Drive Knight. G4 and G5 both have outer shells based on ancient warrior professions. Well, Drive Knight does too. Instead of emerging from a suit, he enters one. His bishop form is a Spartan. But unlike G4 and G5, his doesn't come with a weapon. Or does it? I mean, it suddenly had one when he fused with Jenos. More on that later in the video, by the way. That being said, G5's energy signature was recognizable to Jenos because he fought G4. The fact that he doesn't pick up on the same thing from Drive Knight implies that the cybernetic hero's components are nothing like theirs. In fact, we still don't know if Drive Knight is a robot or a cyborg like Jenos. However, we do have official art of him eating food, so yeah, let me know what you guys think. Anyways, because the association typically picks them, hero names tend to be pretty simple. But Drive Knight's is unique, because for whatever reason, he was allowed to name himself. And this name of his is reflective of his tactical transformations. Silver, Chariot, Knight, Flying Chariot, Bishop, and Gold are all terms from shogi, otherwise known as Japanese chess. And that is exactly how he and the Organization are playing everyone. Drive Knight was one of the heroes at the scene of the alien invasion, but he didn't actually do anything to help them fight. Once the battle was over, Drive Knight approached Jenos. He cryptically told the cyborg that Metal Knight is his enemy. He warned Jenos to stay away from him. Then he left just before Metal Knight arrived on the scene. And although Metal Knight's technology fell into the enemy hands, for a while it seemed like the same thing had happened to Drive Knight. Before the raid, Drive Knight entered the Monster Association's territory ahead of schedule. When they lost the signal from his tracker, the Hero Association had no choice but to assume the S-Class hero had been defeated. They chalked this up to him being overconfident on account of never losing a battle before. But that doesn't exactly line up with how tactical Drive Knight has proven himself to be. Whatever the case, a totally unharmed Drive Knight suddenly appeared and revealed his abilities to us with his fight against Nyan, a disaster-level dragon monster. But that was only after Drive Knight watched a cat monster tear his fellow heroes to shreds. He did this for the sake of gathering battle data that would give him the upper hand. G5 previously asked Goro if Monster Association members were allowed to kill one another. Psychosis' pink plaything wasn't a fan of the idea, so G5 played nice. Meanwhile, Drive Knight didn't have to play by those rules. He tortuously interrogated a number of monsters to gain information on every member of the Monster Association that was disaster level demon and above. He presented this and a complete map of the enemy base to the Hero Association as a result of his solo investigation, easing their suspicions before they could even form. But he didn't really explain why they lost his signal. When G5 first showed up, Goro wondered how the robot was able to find their hideout without getting lost. The puppet also asked to speak to G5's creator, but the samurai robot didn't respond to either. Drive Knight managing to enter the Monster Association's territory undetected is an insane feat. Remember, Metal Knight couldn't do that. He got taken out by Monster King Orochi faster than he could properly react. Goro was very insistent that they avoid letting their forces dwindle. Yet Drive Knight killed a bunch without being discovered. To have gained such thorough schematics of the Monster Association's hideout, he would have needed to have scoured the whole thing. On top of how unbelievable that is on its own, Goro was able to telepathically sense presences like Goro inside the base. Even if Drive Knight is a machine, that shouldn't matter. Goro was able to sense Child Emperor's scouting robot immediately. After beating Nyan, Drive Knight was quick to accuse Metal Knight of being a traitor to the Hero Association. He claimed that Dr. Beaufoy plans to grow his personal military force to eventually take over the world. That by linking many of his robots into one autonomous unit, Dr. Beaufoy's weapons are able to send and receive battle data in real time, improving their overall battle efficiency. And immediately after this conflict, he did give the Hero Association a bunch of robots with adaptive disaster-level artificial intelligence. Drive Knight pointed towards the machine's data being the key to the Monster Association gaining control over Dr. Beaufoy's weapons, which would include missile launch codes and the passwords to unmanned bombers. But here's the thing. Aside from G5, there isn't a single member of the Monster Association with the know-how, let alone the patience, to extract and make use of that information. In fact, G5 was the only one to bother with the broken pieces. I believe that Dr. Beaufoy is a very practical man. He doesn't explain himself to others and is pretty blunt when it comes to his actions. But that alone does not make him a villain. He refused to give the heroes the Monster Association's headquarters despite the enemy having a hostage. But that's because to him, doing so would only lead to everyone dying along with the hostage. Metal Knight is playing this chess game too, and the heroes all rushing into war would no doubt leave their side of the board vulnerable to a checkmate, which is why he's been at the forefront of their defenses. Too bad Saitama's been messing that up. Keeping what he knew a secret was the most rational call he could make in accordance with his own principles on justice. But it wasn't the Monster Association alone that Dr. Beaufoy was afraid of. According to him, there are other evils out there that continue to eye the world, that when humanity is at its lowest point, they will strike and take everything. I'm under the impression that he's talking about the Organization here, and I don't think that the similarity between Metal Knight and Drive Knight's names are just a coincidence. Child Emperor is also a really good kid. It's hard to imagine such a skeptical character being taught by an evil genius and not noticing that he's a bad guy at all. Dr. Beaufoy warned Child Emperor to be careful, that to fight for justice, he only needed himself, that he should accumulate and preserve his power. Drive Knight described how vulnerable the Hero Association was, while its strongest heroes were busy fighting monsters. Besides most of the S-Class heroes, a number of A and B-Class heroes were part of the raid too. Drive Knight then confirmed that the S-Class hero Watchdog Man was also away from Hero Association headquarters. Then he asked the Kingar, a Hero Association executive, if Blast would show up if headquarters is attacked while everyone is away. Once the Kingar let him know that it was unlikely and that Blast is pretty much retired as far as he knows, the robot hero's appearance darkened, and despite his bold claims about Metal Knight, Drive Knight didn't actually have proof of any wrongdoing. Just once the Kingar tried to call headquarters to tell them to increase security, G5 showed up and shot his hand off. Drive Knight barely reacted to the attack. Kingar expected Drive Knight to fight the machine, but the so-called hero did not move an inch. He claimed that he could barely even walk anymore due to a lack of battle energy. This was blamed on dozens of hours of non-stop operations and a difficult fight against Nyan. But I'd like to remind you guys that Nyan didn't deal any real damage to Drive Knight. Instead of acting, Drive Knight continued to ask the Kingar if he could get into contact with Blast. Despite saying that he was having trouble moving, after Jenos took down G5, Drive Knight refused to be carried away along with the injured. And instead of killing Nyan, Drive Knight planned to dissect and study the monster as a reference for biological weapon replicas. Later, Drive Knight helped his fellow S-Class heroes fight against the Psychos Orochi fusion. He did this by commencing a fusion of his own with Jenos. This was made possible by coalescing their energy cores to maximize their power output. But I have to wonder how they were compatible enough to fuse at all. Well, by this point, a fair amount of Jenos' body was based on the Organization's technology. Jenos getting his hands on their stuff wasn't part of the plan, but maybe he's become yet another field tester for them. It's unclear how exactly they view Jenos, but based on Drive Knight's actions, we can assume they especially want him on their side. After all, the name of their fusion was Dragon King. That is the strongest piece in regular shogi. I'm sure the Organization has plans for him. When Jenos and Drive Knight first met, Jenos was still very new to being a member of the Hero Association. Before that, finding and destroying Mad Cyborg was the only thing that Jenos cared about, which leads me to believe that Drive Knight and the Organization might have information to share about Jenos' arch enemy. In the comments, let me know what you think the connection might be. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.